Welcome to the Glory Be to Christ podcast. Glory Be to Christ is a podcast that teaches sound biblical doctrine and makes it accessible for everyday Christians. My name is Sean Clinton, and I will be your host. So in today's episode, we're going to be continuing in our series on the most misused. That is, the most misused Bible verses, where we go after the most misused and most cherry-picked Bible verses, and we exegete them and explain what they actually mean in context. So in today's episode, we're going to be actually going through Philippians 4:13. You know that verse. Everyone knows that verse. Every Christian pretty much knows that verse. I highly doubt there's not a single Christian on this earth who does not know that verse, who has not used it at all. You know the verse. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things. And many times, many Christians use this verse as sort of this motivation for personal achievement, whether someone just graduated from high school, or they have won that great game, or they got that promotion, whatever achievement it is. Christians often use that to say, see, I can do all these things. I can win all these games. I can do all these. I can get that promotion because of Christ. I can graduate from school because of Christ. And you see this, even in high school, many seniors, you put in Philippians 4:13 as their senior quote. I was one of them. I put Philippians 4:13 as my senior quote. I was a baby Christian back then. Don't judge. But, yeah. And Christians, I think, you often use this verse to make themselves look noble and righteous, to avoid to be seen as sort of prideful and boastful in whatever achievement they accomplished. And they use it often. Christians often use it to motivate themselves to be more successful. They use it to if you're playing sports, the Christians use that to kind of motivate themselves to win the game, or to try to win the game. whatever personal achievement it is often used, again, as a sort of a self-righteous mask and a motivational type of lingo, like a bumper sticker. It's a bumper sticker theology. But are they right? Is this verse talking about personal achievement? Is that what Paul's getting at? When Paul was writing to the Philippians, did he write this verse with the intent of motivating Christians in Philippi to get that personal achievement, to, get the greatest riches, or become the greatest theologian even? Is that what Paul was getting at? Well, for starters, let's actually read the entire passage, starting from verse 10 in context. So that is Philippians chapter 4. We're to be started from verse 10. But I rejoice in the Lord greatly, that now at last you have received your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along with humble means. I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. So that is the entire passage in context. So here's some more context of what was happening with Paul as he was writing this letter. So Paul wrote this letter at around 61 AD while he was imprisoned in Rome. And you got to remember, Paul suffered greatly because of his devotion to Christ. He was imprisoned. He was beaten many times. He was flogged about 5 times. And you gotta remember, flogging, it's one single flogging, that is 39 lashes. I mean, if you've seen Passion of Christ, you realize that That is a brutal, brutal punishment. And Paul received that 5 times. And he was stoned, almost stoned to death, and he was shipwrecked. And then, and so on, and on and on and on, until he was finally beheaded by Rome during the reign of Nero. Paul had many downs in his ministry. But it wasn't all bad, of course. He had many ups. He had many great joys in his ministry. I mean, seeing all the people that he preached the gospel to come to the faith. And them going to make disciples and them growing the faith. Yeah, so there was good times and bad times all throughout Paul's ministry. But regardless of his circumstances, he was content. In whatever part of his life he was in, Christ gave him the strength to endure through hardships and to be content in the good times and in the bad times. And this is kind of sort of remarkable for Paul too, because something I actually kind of noticed recently, it seems that a particular sin that Paul struggled with was coveting. We see this in Romans 7, chapter 7. Or it's Romans chapter 7, verse 7. Paul writes, "What shall we say then? Is the law sin? May never be. On the contrary, I would not have come to know sin except through the law. For I would have not known about coveting if the law has said you shall not covet." So obviously it seems that Paul was struggled with coveting. That is, wanting what other people have and trying to get it from them, or pretty much is what coveting means. It's sort of in modern lingo, comparison or envying. So it's kind of cool to see in Philip, obviously Romans was probably written earlier, maybe a little earlier in the ministry, and Philippians was written a little bit later. So it's kind of cool to see the sanctification that the Holy Spirit was doing in Paul throughout his faith journey. And through the strength of Christ, he learned contentment. So no matter if he was in prison, suffering gravely, starving, thirsty, cold, he was content. He was joyful through all these times because he had Christ. And on the contrary, if he was, living with good means in his ministry, he was still content and was very humble because of Christ, because of the strength of Christ. So in context, Paul is not speaking about personal achievement or personal success material-wise, but is speaking and teaching how to be content in all circumstances. That is what Paul is getting at. Learning to live. So in application, I think it would be very helpful for all Christians to actually really study this passage, not just Philippians 4:13, but study from verses 10 through 13. Because especially here in America, coveting is a major sin. It is a major sin, even among many Christians, especially the younger Christians who are growing up with social media and all that. Social media has really kind of escalated this problem. Especially many young Christian women, they see this other Christian lady online who seems to be more successful, more joyful, has a happy family and all that, and they'll be envious. They're coveting, they want that, and they're not being content in the circumstances they are in right now. Become envious of others, of what they have, or where they are in their life, and so on. I'm guilty of this too. It's not just a girl thing, it is a guy thing, and it's a men thing too. Very much so. Coveting can be a major hindrance on our sanctification. It is often said, comparison, which is kind of the modern lingo for coveting, is the thief of joy. True joy. And it is. if you're constantly coveting what others have, comparing yourself to others, that really can hinder your faith and steal your joy. You'll be just living in misery and in depression. So brothers and sisters, we do not need to stay there. Through Christ, we can learn to be content in our season of life. This doesn't mean we are complacent. Don't confuse contentment with complacement. Those are two different things. We should always strive to grow, but we should be content in the moment that we are in. So for example, if you're single, wanting to be married, that is good desire. That is a righteous desire, and pray to God for a spouse. If you're a man, pray to God that He will give you the courage to pursue a wife. And if you're a woman, pray to God that He will bring you a husband. But be content in the season you're in. Be content in your singleness. If you're at a job that, doesn't bring in much money, it's not a bad thing to desire a different job or kind of a higher paying job, especially if you have a family. It's not a bad thing to desire a higher paying job so you can provide for your family. Provide better. So you can see God's wisdom and will in that. But be content in where you are in that circumstances. Don't be covetous. Don't be envious. Be content while also seeking God's will and wisdom. Whether you wish rich or poor, whether you are healthy or sick, whatever it may be content. It is only through the strength of Christ that this is made possible. That's what Paul is ultimately getting at. The only reason why we're able to be content in our circumstances, whatever they are, whether they're good or bad, the only reason why we are able to be content in them is because of Christ. It's because of the strength of Christ. Because if it was by our own strength, we would not be content at all. We'll be constantly coveting, be envious of everything. This is why things like socialism is not compatible with Christianity, even though many tried to make it so. Socialism breaks at least half of the 10 Commandments. It is a covetous and even theft-driven ideology and even theology. It makes it to where you're coveting your neighbor's goods or property and wealth, and you wanted the government to take that from them and give it to you. That is not a Christian virtue. That is a Marxist, satanic, demonic worldview. It is not compatible with Christianity at all. So for the Christian, be content. Do not envy. Do not covet. Be content in whatever circumstances you're in, but strive to grow in the faith. Strive to grow in whatever area of life you are in, according to God's will and purpose. And persevere and stand firm in the faith through all circumstances, whether good or whether bad. Alrighty, so I hope this episode encourages you and convicts you on how you have used this verse in the past. So we'll be back here next week with our next most misused verse. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and share it, and subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. And you can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I hope everyone has a great week, and remember, all glory be to Christ.